3,
2,
1.
Aimo.
Balkans Calling. Voices from the region.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Balkans Calling, Voices from the Region. My name's Jack Broughton. I'm an assistant with the Seafield Project here in Regensburg, strengthening Southeast European studies in Regensburg. And I'm here today, lucky enough to be able to interview Annemarie Sorescu-Marinković from the Institute for Balkan Studies of the Serbian Academy for Arts and Sciences. She's here visiting us all the way from Belgrade today. She's come all the way to the EOS, the Institute for East and Southeast European Studies here in Regensburg. And I'm going to have a little chat with her today about multilingualism and what it means for her and in the contexts that she researches. Annemarie, lovely to have you here today.
Thank you for your invitation, Jack.
Thank you for coming. Would you mind telling me a little bit about your research? Give me a little introduction and give the listeners a little bit of an introduction to the topics that you work on and where your main focuses lie.
Okay, so my main topics of research these days are the Romanian-speaking communities in the Balkans. Not only Romanian-speaking communities, but also Romance. So I'm more into Romance linguistics. My focus is Eastern Serbia and the Vlach community, who speaks non-standardized, non-codified yet variety of Romanian language. And the Boyash of the Balkans, who are spread all over the Balkans, and they also speak another and different non-standardized varieties of Romanian. Apart from that, I'm also interested in Aromanians and Meglino-Romanians, but these are, so to say, secondary directions. Currently, I'm involved in a very interesting project, which I will talk about a bit later in the day. It's called Vulnerable Languages and Linguistic Varieties in Serbia. And I will tell the audience a few words about it because I think it's quite innovative, and we are already in our second year of the project, and the results are quite amazing. So everybody who talks about endangered languages in Serbia, who writes about it, starts from the UNESCO Catalogue of Endangered Languages and has this short introduction, like according to UNESCO's Atlas. These languages are endangered in Serbia. However, my team and I write about it all the time. We have to say, however, the UNESCO data is not up to date. And we have gotten, sort of bored of saying that all the time because we know that our field experience says something different. And we said, fine, let's write a project, go to the field. Serbia is small and we can cover it all and see what is the state of language endangerment and vulnerability in Serbia these days. And I think we have come up with a very nice instrument for assessing language vulnerability and endangerment. And at the end of next year, we'll come up with a graded scale of language vulnerability in Serbia. So this is one project. And the other one is a bilateral project with the university in Jena. It's called Semiotic Landscapes of Multilingual Border Regions. And all the field research was also done in Serbia by my colleagues and the colleagues from Jena. And tomorrow we'll have the closing conference of the project. As you might infer, it deals with language used in public spaces in these multilingual border regions, of which we have quite a lot, not only in Serbia but in Europe. So it's also interesting to see what languages can be heard in a particular region and what languages can be seen on public inscriptions in a certain region, and obviously and very frequently there is a huge gap between these two, which reflect the prestige of different languages, their economical power, discrimination, and language policy.
Linguistic landscapes is where we kind of overlap in a way, because my personal interests and research interests and where I'm going with my master thesis is also in this realm of linguistic landscapes, and the many issues that you can read out of the use of language in the public space. It's a fascinating topic.
I agree.
You mentioned a couple of vulnerable linguistic communities just now. I was wondering, what for you do you think are the most pressing issues facing these vulnerable linguistic communities in Serbia?
I think it's a tough question, because different minority languages are faced with different issues, and this is not valid only for Serbia but for the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. So languages disappear like people. I mean, how does the language die? It is killed. So languages disappear when the people who speak it disappear. Why? Because of war, of famine, because the economic power of another language is too big and presses out this smaller, not that powerful language. However, languages become vulnerable also because they lack institutional support, educational support, which in Serbia, at least on paper, all minority languages have. Probably our audience doesn't know that Serbia has 15 minority languages. I mean, it's a small country, and it's quite surprising, if not shocking, to see that there are 15 minority languages spoken in Serbia. And they all have institutional support, but the most pressing problems minority languages face, in my view, is the lack of intergenerational transmission, because the family is the most important in keeping a language alive. As I said, not all languages are facing that. The Roma language, the Roma dialect spoken in Serbia, still score very well on this scale, so intergenerational transmission is very high there. But the Roma people have a lot of other pressing problems. I think they do not have a critical mass of people who would fight for their language rights, and who would want Romani to be included in the school curricula, and etc. Then in Serbia, another very, very pressing problem is stigmatization of the language and the discrimination of the speakers. And this is also true, again, for Romani, but not only. For the Vlach variety spoken in eastern Serbia, it's also true. The language has a very low prestige, and a lot of people speaking Vlach keep it a secret and try to use it only within the family, and avoid of being heard speaking the language on the streets, because it has a very low prestige, and they don't want to be discriminated against. So if I am to give a short answer to this question, it would be stigmatization of the language and discrimination of the people.
Roma is a term that a lot of our listeners will probably be familiar with, because we have a large community of Roma-speaking people here in Germany too. Vlach is probably a word that a lot of our listeners are not familiar with. What kind of language is it? Is it related to any languages that we might have heard around us?
Oh, yes. Well, Vlach is a very wide term, in fact, and Vlach has been used in the last 2 centuries and more for all Romanized people in the Balkans. However, when I say Vlach, I mean the Romanian variety spoken in eastern Serbia by the population who call themselves Vlach in Serbian, but Romani or Romanians in their variety, in their Vlach variety. So there is an overarching use of this term Vlachs. You might have heard it used for the Aromanians in the Balkans or for Megleno-Romanians, meaning for all Romanized populations. Here, why do I use Vlach and not Romanian? Because the language is being standardized as we speak, and the name of the language will not be Romanian, but Vlach, Limba Vlachă.
I see.
So I want to listen to the people. I mean, there are a lot of factions in the community. Part of them want their language to be acknowledged as Romanian, but the bigger part want it to be standardized as a separate language from Romanian, which is Vlach and has a different grammar and a lexicon with a lot of words from Serbian, which is all fine. I mean, language is not only a linguistic phenomenon, it's more or less a sociological phenomenon.
Right,
so
exactly. And it's important to listen to the people themselves and respect their wishes for their own language, isn't it?
Right.
So that they can have ownership of this.
Exactly.
Absolutely. How would you describe more broadly, then, the current state of multilingualism in Serbia?
Well, Serbia, even if, again, it's a small country, according to the last census, there are around 6,500,000 people in Serbia. So Serbia has several regions, and some are more multilingual than other, if I can say so. Vojvodina is recognized as the region of Serbia with a very rich tradition of multilingualism and multi-ethnicity, multiculturality, etc. There you have lots of minority languages spoken, and maybe it's important to say that the autonomous province of Vojvodina, as its full name is, has 6 official languages, meaning in official use.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So apart from Serbian, which is used with both the Cyrillic and Latin alphabet, maybe you did not know, Serbian is the only European language with active digraphia, meaning both the Latin and the Cyrillic alphabet are used parallelly in the same share, let's say.
But often in different domains, would you say, or how is it shared between them?
Well, that's debatable. In the last years, the Cyrillic tends to be used more in official documents and by state institutions. However, Latin cannot lose the race,
right,
so to say. Mm-hmm. So all these affirmative measures taken towards the Cyrillic are still okay because Cyrillic, because of the technology, Cyrillic tends to be used less. Mm-hmm. But now I would say they are in equal use,
okay,
more or less. Even if, on the streets, in ads and on TV, you tend to see more Latin than Cyrillic.
Okay.
Yeah, so Vojvodina has 6 official languages, apart from Serbian. You have Romanian in active use, in official use, Slovak, Rusin. Okay, you got me there.
And a few others.
I will remember. Hungarian, of
Hungarian
course.
also. Okay.
Yes. Hungarian is the biggest minority of Serbia.
Okay.
With almost 3%.
Okay, a significant minority then.
Yes. But what I wanted to say was that Roma comes close. Roma Roma people make up for 2% of the population. However, their language is not in official use in Vojvodina nor anywhere else. So you can see this stigmatization of the language.
Of course, yeah.
It goes quite deep. So even if there are several schools in Serbia where Roma people can study, in fact, they cannot study in Romani, but they can take this optional course 2 times per week, Romani language with elements of national culture. They do not see their language anywhere. So their language is also absent in the linguistic landscape, totally absent, which is quite something.
And this has to do with the stigmatization of the language, but also are there other social aspects which, in your view, affect the further propagation of the Roma language in Serbia? I read, for example, that here in the German context, the fact that it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but quite difficult to standardize and often only spoken and rarely written. Does this also have an impact, or is that just something that I've read that's specific here to the German context?
That is a topic which deserves another hour of talking. I
Another
think
podcast episode.
Yeah. This standardization of languages. However, Romani has been standardized already in the 60s, and it has been standardized again. But working on the field with Roma people and wanting to record something in their language, I've heard lots of times them saying our language cannot be written down because it's not standardized. So they are not aware of the fact that it's not standardized, and also Roma language has a lot of dialects which are quite different from each other. And people speaking one dialect might not understand what the others are talking. So then the question of standardization becomes not relevant any longer, because as in every standardization you take one variety and make it a standard which excludes the speakers of other varieties. As for the Roma people as a whole, they most of them do not know it has been standardized because they do not read anything in Romani. They do not have easy access to publications in Romani, and they have much more pressing problems. I mean, the lack of education of our interviewees, I think more than half do not have finished primary school, and they still live on the verge of subsistence in Serbia in a lot of these non-hygienic settlements, or how they call them. So language and language rights and the right of using their language in administration and education comes on the last place for them, because they have to fight for survival first and foremost.
Of course, and this is a very interesting issue that I would love to speak to you more about if we get another opportunity in the future, for sure. You mentioned that a lot of these minority languages deal with a stigmatization issue, and that people don't speak them even when they can, or maybe hide the fact that they come from these communities. My next question would be, more generally, what connotations do you think multilingualism has in Serbia, also for the majority society?
That's also a good question. When you say multilingualism in Serbia, first and foremost you think about Vojvodina. Nobody is used to think in terms of any other region of Serbia being multilingual, which is a mistake, because in the last, 10 or 20 years, Belgrade has also changed its language profile quite a lot. It has turned into a rather multilingual city, I would say, even if people coming from these minority communities usually hide the fact that they speak another language apart from Serbia when they are in Belgrade. I mean, Belgrade is a melting pot which imposes Serbian to everybody who can speak it. But what I want to say is that you have a quite big and thriving community of Chinese in Belgrade, and they have started coming in the 90s, I think, but in the beginning they were invisible, so to speak. However, today you see them, and you see Chinese a lot in the linguistic landscape, which is quite a new development, and it should be studied by somebody. Then you have a big Russian community in the last 2 years, I think, and Russian is also becoming quite visible in the linguistic landscape and in the soundscape of Belgrade. Apart from that, multilingualism, or better said, bilingualism, is quite present in Eastern Serbia. But again, Eastern Serbia, which is traditionally inhabited by Vlachs and Serbs alike, has been completely multilingual in the linguistic landscape until 10 years ago, I think, when the first actions towards revitalizing Vlach language and towards standardizing it have appeared. Now you have this timid attempts of using Vlach on side roads, names of streets, and so on, and the region is regaining somehow its bilingualism. I mean, people there, the Vlachs, are slowly starting to drop this stigma of speaking a language which is thought by the majority to be less worth than Serbian. So again, to ask your question in a few words, I think that multilingualism used to be considered an elitist phenomenon, but today even the majority population is much more open to diversity, to language diversity in Serbia as a whole.
And hopefully these measures that you've talked about help with that process, because not only, as we know from linguistic landscape studies, it's often a circle. You say a language, you can see that a language does not appear in the linguistic landscape because it has low prestige, but then once it starts to appear in the linguistic landscape, maybe you've observed a similar thing, people start to respect the fact that it has a right to be in the linguistic landscape. Exactly.
It's like with standardizing, the moment you see it written, it's real, and it's worth much more.
Absolutely, yeah, that seems to be a very common attitude to language.
Yeah.
In your experience, do you think the perception of multilingualism in Serbia differs from other contexts that you've had contact with? Like, for example, at least in official contexts in the European Union, multilingualism is often touted as this goal that we should all be working towards, but we suffer down on the ground from many of the same misconceptions and blind spots that people all over the world do when it comes to multilingualism. Would you say that the situation in Serbia is distinct in some way, or maybe differs from other parts of the world?
Tough question, difficult to answer. Well, in the European Union, multilingualism, as you said, is a goal. In Serbia, it is not.
Right.
At least it's not. It's not a publicly stated goal. In the European Union, multilingualism is understood as the ability of societies, institutions, groups, or individuals to engage on a regular basis with more languages in their day-to-day lives. I would say that in Serbia, multilingualism as its best is an individual phenomenon, and that institutions do not yet play a big role in that. I mean, Serbia has a lot of other issues to deal with, and I'm sure in the near future multilingualism might become a goal, but for the time being it's only the province of Vojvodina who cherishes its multilingualism, its multilingual heritage.
Okay, I see.
So to say.
I see. And would you say that these efforts to change the situation, are they having much success? Are they significant? Are they affecting significant change?
You mean in Vojvodina? Or
for example, yeah.
I think Vojvodina is also living on its past glory. I mean, now I did not choose probably the proper expression, but everybody's talking about Vojvodina as the multilingual society par excellence. It's not quite like that, because in Vojvodina, Serbian is also used more and more, and a lot of children coming from multilingual families do not speak all the languages of their parents any longer. So Serbian is becoming lingua franca there also, which was not the case 50 years ago. And there was a quite interesting study, Linguistic Landscape study made in Subotica, and the result was that Serbian is the language used in 80% of the cases, and not all the other minority languages spoken in Vojvodina, unfortunately.
I see. So people might have a misconception of this region.
I think so.
That isn't true, or isn't true anymore.
Isn't true any longer. But, I mean, there is hope. I don't want to sound pessimistic. And Vojvodina is putting all the efforts into cherishing this tradition of multilingualism. However, the reality is a bit different, and the results of the last census show, unfortunately, that a dramatic drop in the number of all national minorities in Serbia.
I see.
And of the languages they speak.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. My final question, zooming out a little bit more if we can, is do you believe that there are aspects of multilingualism, not only in Serbia but also in a wider sense, which you believe are underappreciated or under-researched, where there's still a lot of potential or need for research to focus on those aspects?
I think there is still need and a great potential in multilingual research. For Serbia, I can say that child language in multilingual situations has not been researched at all, and I think this is a very fruitful possible direction of research. We must have, a team with a psychologist and a psycholinguist who would work in this bilingual families or multilingual families and see which are the mechanisms at work when a child acquires the language. This has been done elsewhere, but not in Serbia, not to my knowledge. Then we have this standardization myth or standardization complex, which I think in Serbia is much more acute than elsewhere. And I think it's not only the Roma and the Vlachs, it's also other communities who speak non-standardized languages and who are ashamed of speaking them until they are standardized, which is, an impossible aim for many of them. And I think this myth of standardization comes as an unfortunate heritage of the dissolution of the former Serbo-Croatian language, when all four children wanted their standard, and now it has, a repercussion upon all other minority communities in Serbia who also want their language standardized, even if they do not know exactly what standardization means. But, having a codified language, having your language written down, having a decision that this is a proper language means a lot for minority language speakers.
As a kind of hallmark that it's valid.
Exactly.
Right, okay. That's a very interesting topic, standardization, absolutely, and a very complex one with a lot of technical but also social factors. For sure. All right, well, thank you very much for our conversation today. You've offered a lot of very, very interesting insights into the topic of multilingualism. As Annemarie mentioned earlier, she's giving a talk here in Regensburg at the IOS later this afternoon on the topic of mother tongue and what it means to vulnerable linguistic communities. Mother tongue, another term that we all believe that we have a sort of instinctive, intuitive understanding of what it means. But when you get into the topic and you actually ask people with a very different life experience to us, it often means many different things to many different people. Thank you very much for coming, Annemarie. And
thank you, Jack.
Thank you for joining us in the studio today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. If you're interested in minority language issues and would like to learn about Germany's largest minority language, Turkish, and the place of Turkish speakers in German society, we recommend the episode Minority Languages and Their Reception in Germany from the podcast of the Centre for Minorities Research.